Hello, and welcome to the final webinar for CLIR's Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices Applicant Support Series. To begin, we want to share some notes about using Zoom during this session. You can click the CC Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window to turn on the live transcript. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. You're welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. To send a message to everyone, change the default from host and panelists to everyone. Use the separate Q&A box to ask questions. We'll try to answer all questions live, and we'll also share responses to all questions after the webinar. The session is being recorded, and the recording, slide, and Q&A document and transcript will be available on the Apply for an Award page on our website within 2 weeks. Our team would like to center today's conversation by acknowledging that as residents of the United States, we are speaking to you from unceded land of many Indigenous peoples. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize the original and current caretakers of the land, water, and air where I live, the Shawnee and Osage peoples, and all their ancestors and descendants. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on their homelands and ask you to join me in acknowledging all Indigenous communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. May this acknowledgement remind us of our shared commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism.
Hi, everyone. I'm Louisa Kwasigroch, Managing Director at CLIR and a proud member of the Grants Team. I'm really thrilled that you've joined us today, and I'm grateful for the time and care that you've been putting into your applications and your project plans. Before introducing our esteemed panelists, we'd like to share a few key reminders to help you prepare your proposal. After administering this program for several years, our team has developed a strong understanding of what reviewers are looking for and what they are not in the competitive application. We hope these suggestions will help you present your project as clearly and effectively as possible. And if I might offer a suggestion, please check your numbers and your math and then check them again. Okay, I'll let the team move on to the rest of our reminders.
To start off, we're going to begin with general reminders. These are things for you to double check as you put together your final application. So you want to ensure all application uploads adhere to the page limits. Any documents that exceed the page limit will be truncated before being sent to the review panel. You'll want to double check that the project timeline in the application form matches the timeline in your work plan and that all grant activities will take place during the grant period. Make sure your external letters of support are not from anyone involved in the project or anyone who will receive payment if awarded funds. Make sure you have a letter or letters of commitment from the applying organization and one for each official collaborating organization if applicable. Include a vendor quote for any service, $5,000 or more. Make sure your vendor quote also matches the requested amount in your budget detail and budget narrative. Include resumes for all principal investigators or PIs on your project. Include job descriptions for any new hires, and this includes interns. These can be combined and uploaded as one PDF. And then final application should include at least 3 and up to 10 representative samples. These will help reviewers see the types of materials you propose to digitize. Again, if you include more than 10 samples, that document will be truncated before being sent to the review panel.
Here are some reminders about the budget specifically. Check that the requested amount is between $50,000 and $300,000 US. Requesting an amount outside this range will disqualify your application. Be sure to use the required templates for the budget detail and budget narrative. You can find these linked on the Apply for an Award page under the Draft Your Application section. Jane has just dropped that page into the chat. The amount requested on the application form in the project overview section must match the total in the budget detail and budget narrative. All amounts included on the budget detail and budget narrative should also be in US dollars. If the amounts do not match, the application will be disqualified. Double check all calculations are correct on the budget narrative. We're seeing more and more errors in the budget narrative that lead to confusion regarding the amount needed to complete the proposed project. Double check that there are not disallowed costs, such as administrative support for single organization applications, furniture, expenses outside the grant period. There are limits for certain budget categories. There is a maximum of $15,000 for equipment, supplies, and materials. There is a maximum of $7,500 for conference registration and related travel expenses. There is a maximum of $10,000 for administrative support, and again, this is only allowable for collaborative projects. These limits and disallowed costs can all be found in Appendix A of the application guidelines. Do not include cost share amounts in the budget detail. Only include cost share amounts in the cost share section of the budget narrative. Further, your cost share amounts should not be included in the total requested amount at the top of the budget narrative. It's also not required to include a cost share. Reviewers will want to see livable and equitable wages for everyone working on the project, including consultants, staff, and interns. If someone from your organization outside your team completes the budget detail or budget narrative, please be sure to share these resources, including the application guidelines, with them.
I'm Sharon Burney, and I'm joined today by my fellow program officer, Alyson. Over the next hour, we'll be answering all of your questions related to the final application, and we'll aim to finish around 3 o'clock Eastern Time. We're supported today by our colleagues from the CLIR Grants Team, Jane Larson, Lizzi Albert, and Louisa Kwasigroch.
It would be so helpful if I unmuted myself. Sorry, everyone. Joining us today are experts from the CLIR community to answer your questions and provide guidance as you develop a competitive application. They have also all served as reviewers for our regranting programs, so they can share insights from their experience working on digitization projects and serving as reviewers. Our first panelist is Dr. Ida E. Jones, Associate Director of Special Collections and University Archivist at Morgan State University. She is an award-winning author and recognized leader in African American women's, organizational, and religious history. Notably, Dr. Jones has advanced archival access and awareness at Morgan State, providing consultation for campus and community organizations and overseeing significant collections. Dr. Jones works to make archival work accessible by hosting biannual open houses in the Beulah M. Davis Special Collections Department at Morgan. Her accomplishments span publications, speaking roles at conferences, leadership in community history projects, and media features. She is inspired by Mary McLeod Bethune's words, "Power must walk hand in hand with humility, and the intellect must have a soul." Dr. Jones serves as a reader for the initial application round of the Digitizing Hidden Collections program. Dr. Jones will be responding to questions related to assessing collections, such as identifying and clarifying the collections of materials that will be nominated for digitization, accurately estimating volume of materials and digitization outputs, and making a competitive case for digitization. Our second panelist is C.K. Ming, Media Conservation and Digitization Specialist at the Center of African American Media Arts, CAAMA, at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. They work to inspect, digitize, and preserve CAAMA's vast holdings of audiovisual material. Their interests include early African American silent film and independent African American cinema. They hold an MA from New York University in Moving Image Archive and Preservation and a BA from American University in Film and Media Arts. CK serves as a reviewer for another CLIR granting program, Recordings at Risk. CK will be responding to questions related to designing a digitization plan, such as setting a realistic timeline, choosing appropriate technology, and technical standards for digitization, considering in-house digitization versus a vendor.
Our third panelist is Sandra Aya Enimil, Director for Scholarly Communication and Collection Strategy at Yale University. At Yale, Sandra contributes to advancing openness by providing strategic insight information and resources on scholarly communication and open scholarship. She also consults with Yale researchers on using copyrighted materials and assists creators in protecting their own copyright. Sandra is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion and is interested in the intersection of DEI and intellectual property. Sandra earned her law and MSLIS degrees from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Sandra has degrees in political science and psychology from the University of Michigan and an MA in international relations from the University of Ghana. Sandra serves as an intellectual property reviewer for another CLIR granting program, Recordings at Risk. Sandra Aya Enimil will be responding to questions regarding the rights, ethics, and reuse section of your application, such as identifying rights and ethics concerns in original materials, assessing risk, and determining appropriate access with creators and community in mind. Our fourth panelist is DeLisa Minor Harris. DeLisa is the Director of Library Services at Fisk University, where she leads library and archival initiatives through the John Hope and Aurelia E. Franklin Library. Her work includes securing and managing grants that support preservation and broader access to cultural heritage collections. She led Fisk University's first CLIR Digitizing Hidden Collections grant. Her grant work has supported digitization, metadata creation, collection access, and long-term project planning at Fisk. She is a PhD candidate in public history at Middle Tennessee State University, where her research focuses on Henrietta Crawley Myers and African-American women's contributions to historic preservation and public memory. DeLisa served as a reader for the initial application round of the Digitizing Hidden Collections program. DeLisa will be answering questions regarding staffing and budget, such as staffing considerations and training needs, offering a compelling case for need in a budget narrative, and using a budget narrative to build a justified budget detail.
We're going to get started with questions and answers now, and we will begin with a few questions we have received related to each topic. Then we will address additional questions that you all are welcome to submit through the Q&A box. You're welcome to start submitting those questions now, and if we run out of time to answer all of them today, we'll be sure to provide written answers in the Q&A doc that will be posted alongside the recording. Let me stop my share.
Okay, the first question is going to be under the assessing collections subject matter, and it's for Ida. What advice do you have for those of us digitizing materials on a specific subject from multiple collections? Also, what should we consider when selecting materials for digitization?
Thank you. That's a very good question. What should drive any digitization project I've come to realize is the researcher interest. The traffic you have from researchers both institutionally as well at large also helps bring your visibility up to your institution and to the subject matter itself. So if you think about we're in the 250th or the semi-sesquicentennial of America, everything military is greatly popular right now, from the Revolutionary War up until probably Desert Storm. So if you have those kinds of items in your collection, that might be of interest to researchers, but would also show your patriotism to certain political bosses about the country. If you are looking at also the 50 years since Roots, if you have any genealogical collections in your material that is celebrating 50 years of Alex Haley's Roots, that might be something of interest as well to genealogists. So you really want to make sure that your collection materials match rising, if not undercurrents in research trends, so that you can galvanize the best bang for your buck, so to speak, and making sure that your materials that are available are visible to researchers both within your institution and writ large.
Thank you, Ida. Next question is for CK. What are common challenges or disruptions you see in digitization projects, and do you have any recommendations for how to plan for the unexpected as folks develop their work plan?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is, sorry, there's an ambulance. I don't know if you can hear that, but one of the biggest challenges is definitely on timeline. I think, especially with magnetic media, which is taking longer to digitize because of having to bake it. I think baking is now up to 1 to 2 weeks in order to get a good transfer. You're really going to want to bake in some time if your materials need to be baked or conserved. I've seen a lot of materials with mold that have to end up being conserved, and applicants didn't account for that. So I think padding your schedule by at least a month to 2 months to account for that is would really be the right move. Um, and I think also the QC, I often see people don't allot enough time to do the quality assurance on their end to ensure that the files they've received from the vendor have a good transfer, are not, the digital files are have integrity, all of that kind of thing. I see people kind of say, "Oh, that'll take us 2 weeks," when really, if you're have hundreds of files are coming back, unless you have an army of people to do quality control, you're not going to finish that in 2 weeks. So really making time to be sure, because I've had things come back from vendors where the files are not correct, and vendors don't keep your files forever. So you also want to make sure and check with the vendor you have to see how long they will keep your files while you do your own quality assurance. If it's only 30 days, that's an issue. You're going to want to talk to the vendor about that, because that just may not be feasible on your end to do that amount of file checking at that time.
Thank you, CK. The next question is under rights, ethics, and reuse, and it's for Sandra. From your perspective as an IP reviewer, if some of the materials we are nominating for digitization contain personally identifiable information, will we be penalized for restricting access to those materials?
Hi. For me as an IP reviewer and also someone who's kind of looking at cultural heritage considerations or ethical considerations, I would consider it to be a plus. From my perspective, if you, in looking at some of your content that you want to digitize, realize that there's personal identifying information or information that maybe shouldn't be publicly available, or have any other issues where maybe it should be restricted, and you address that, you talk about the fact that, hey, we've noticed that, just in doing maybe a test that some of this content shouldn't be publicly made available, I would count that as a bonus. Like I would count that as something where it clearly shows that you are considering some of the subject and subject matter who are in your collections and wanting to do something to make sure that personally identifying information or maybe other cultural heritage issues or privacy issues are being addressed. And so I would, again, consider that to be a bonus if you have something where you are talking about what you're going to do about that.
For DeLisa, if we're applying for I shouldn't say we because I'm not applying for anything. If folks are applying for a multi-year grant, should they add in annual cost of living pay increases for each staff member?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think there's a couple of factors that go into that. One, thinking about first CLIR's requirements in terms of salaries and wages, and making sure that you look at their um, guidelines for that. That's first. And then if that is something that it doesn't explicitly say is not allowed or you could not do, then I would secondly look at, if you're part of an institution or an organization, what has been the practice, and then are the standard. So if that's the case, like in terms of what is the typical percentage for a COLA for a full-time staff. And then you have to think about regionally if it's appropriate. So I'm in Nashville, where cost of living increases probably every year due to the amount of people that are moving into our area. And so yeah, it's definitely a serious consideration. But make sure that you're looking at all factors for that. And then the other important part is in your narrative that you're very clear about why you're doing a COLA and citing your again your regional or area sort of practices that have happened based on your area and then your institution too. So ensuring that that's clear, very clear in the narrative. So yeah.
Thank you, DeLisa. Okay, we're gonna get into some of these questions. This first one I'll answer from a program officer's standpoint and then defer to DeLisa for any follow-up. Question is the budget allocation slash stipend being desirable for community? So is including a budget allocation or stipend for community desirable? I think what you're asking is maybe you have a community advisory board or you have community members that are assisting you with the process of this project, either with the metadata afterwards, helping clarify the metadata afterwards, or possibly including them in the process of determining which materials are available. It's very recommended. One of the 5 core values of the system is community collaborations. And so you can include a honorarium is what we would probably place it under category rise. And we would like to see the honorariums be definitely fair. It's just as fair as when you're paying your staff and salary. So I think that's how reviewers favorably look at it. But DeLisa, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, exactly my thoughts along the this question. We've included stipends before for our advisory board or advisory members a part of the project, and also to you may have subject matter experts or people that are helping you to really ensure your metadata is um non-problematic and thoughtful and you know uh accessible for your audience and what you're looking to do as open access. So yeah, I think before I think there's a thing for either services or administrative support or other costs. And I think based on the guidelines in the CLIR package, again, making sure that you're reading those details, you'll know exactly which allowable category it could fit for. And then thinking appropriately too, again, on that amount, you want to do some backup research. If you're at an institution, talk to a couple people, talk to your grants office. What's the standard? You don't want to write something and then when you say, you whoever institution or organization is like, oh no, we don't do that, or you want to make sure you're across the board meeting all guidelines. So
I just want to add as a program officer, you cannot receive a letter of support from anyone getting paid from your project. So you cannot give an honorarium to somebody and then ask them to write a letter of support. And you can only get administrative support if you're a collaborating organization.
There's definitely other ways to horn that in, but thank you, Sharon. That letter of support issue comes up a lot, so please don't get letters of support from your advisory board. I'm going to take this kind of easy program officer question. Due to inflation, vendor estimates may have changed since the initial application phase. Is there an acceptable range of variation from the initial budget in the final application phase? We expect to see budgets change between the initial and final application phase, and we do not have a set or acceptable range of variance as long as your budget still fits in within program guidelines and you still have a budgetary balance that indicates your program focus is digitization. I'm going to take this next one to CK. If we intend to digitize internally, would you recommend QCing preservation files as they are created and not as a batch? Same with making access master and access files.
Um, I think that really depends on the amount I think QCing at the time can help you catch errors in your digitization process early, especially if you have to clean or bake a tape. But there are also ways to automate QC. So if you're doing hundreds of tapes, you might want to automate QC on the back end as well as you check for errors in the tape right after digitization. I would also recommend doing your access files at the end. Again, there are ways to automate that process so you're not waiting on your computer and slowing it down as it creates an access MP4.
Our next question, I think, is probably a program officer question, which is it too late to add a collaborator at this final stage of the grant? No, we've definitely had people before that are working on building out the relationships through the initial application phase, and that kind of helps them solidify what they're doing and who they're doing it with. Um, and if you can kind of fit within the timeline of the program to still get that relationship made official, it's fine to add a collaborator for the second round. I don't think we have more Q&A live questions yet.
Okay, I think we have one. Regarding letters of support, if we get a letter of support from an organization, but then we have a person from the organization on the advisory council, is that allowed? Yes. Real simple. Yes.
I would
Okay. Who is that? Okay, if we find our project may take longer than we originally anticipated, can we amend the timeline as long as it's within the funding window? We might need a little more context on that. If you need to amend your timeline from the original initial application, that's fine. You can do that prior to submitting your application. However, for your final application, your timeline should be as close to where you want it to be right now as possible. I don't really want to get into reallocations right now.
more geared to us, it's about program minutia. We receive feedback to make our main vendor a collaborating organization. Unfortunately, they are not able to due to that precluding their own grant application opportunities. Is another option to list them as a consulting partner. You can send us an email for more specifics about the situation. It's typically fine to have a vendor that is just a vendor. If you were advised to add them as a partner because they own or hold some portion of the materials, or because they're going to be providing long-term access, that's sort of a more complicated situation to give advice on. Um, so I would need to know why you were advised to make them a collaborating or consulting partner. But typically, it's okay to have a vendor that's just a vendor. I'm gonna take one, two.
Is this a part two from the same one? If you need to amend your timeline from your initial round application, no. Okay. Let me do this next one. Thanks for explaining about the board. Would it be a conflict of interest to get a letter of support from someone who is a CLIR grant reviewer? Yes. Yes, no, you cannot get one from somebody who's on the review panel. That would be a conflict of interest. Unless you can, but they can't review your application. I don't encourage that.
I want to maybe take a moment
Talk about letters
to
of
kick to the
support.
panel. Does anyone on the panel want to give some guidance about how to choose good folks to ask to write your
Yes.
letters
Yes,
that
please.
perhaps aren't directly related to your project?
Yeah. And before they start that, I want to say again, if somebody from your project is getting paid, they cannot write a letter of support for you. If they're not getting paid from the project, then you're good. And there's two letters. There's an institutional support letter, which will come from your organization, and then the letter of support, which we recommend that all the letters of support don't come from your institution. But please give them some guidance. Who wants to go? CK?
Yeah, when I review, I like to echo Ida on the researcher um app sorry, I'm sick, y'all. Um, the strongest letters of support I've received are from scholars in the field who can really point to why the digitization of the collection is necessary. So that's why I wanted to echo Ida's point about how you choose. Is there's a strong research foundation to this material that people can't currently access because it's not digitized. So that's what and again, not someone that you're paying for the project.
I'd like to chime into that as well. I'm in a university setting, so there's a vertical hierarchy here. So trying to get the second to highest person invested in this, which would be the provost and or someone in his office, which we're under academic affairs, is very helpful because we are competing in the humanities with the hard sciences. And so when they see humanities projects that are either solo or collaborative, it also once again gives you the visibility of your valuable. And I know we're all kind of competing for resources and attention, and we don't want to be the redheaded stepchild that doesn't get any of the attention. No pun or no offense to anybody who's redheaded or a stepchild, but just the idea that you're competing, and you have to really want to make your application sing and look like wow. The first couple of sentences that wow, you're doing this kind of work. So I know that the provost, who is a chemist here on my campus, has been very titillated with what the success of my area has been for other grants that I've applied for. Nothing in CLIR, clearly can apply for CLIR from the review panel, but definitely encouraging other institutions in the HBCU world to consider CLIR. And I know I've seen a number of them come through, and I'm so excited that we can take the time out of our multitasking to do so. So once again, thank you, CLIR, but also to encourage them to go as high as they can organizationally to get that visibility that works dynamically for them.
So I'll just add, as a reviewer, something that I thought was helpful. Um, and don't ask me if this was eventually approved or not. I don't know. But I remember in the discussions, one of the types of letters that folks found helpful was a letter. The collection involved a particular community, and there was a letter from persons in the community kind of actually explaining maybe a little bit better than the applicant, like what actually was going on and their commitment and interest in having the content be digitized. And that was really useful. So if that's a possibility, I the reviewers found it very helpful.
I'm gonna take, I think this is a follow-up for DeLisa. Um, can part of the salary be covered by the organization and the other part covered by CLIR to assist with cost of living?
Okay. So, for CLIR, this is a pretty straightforward budget, right? Cost share is not required, but in the case of, let's say your university is supplementing a salary um for this grant, then you could notate that in the cost share budget narrative part. correct me if I'm wrong at any point, CLIR people, but the other part of this is to consider this is a term limited salary. So 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, whatever your grant is written for. So um you know, I think it's helpful to get that, but also just consider that at some point that part that CLIR is covering is term limited. So if there's a way to I don't want to say I think it's good to have the university or institution to do to have a supplement, because maybe then they could provide it. I'm thinking out loud, everyone. They can maybe fund the position after the grant. So I think it is good. But I think it falls under, again, budget narrative, making sure that you're articulating this in your narrative so that they understand and that the numbers are correct in a sense. But remembering too that this is a very straightforward budget where, whole numbers, get your numbers, it just, based on federal grants. It's much better, it's much easier. So I think those are the considerations you have to make. I hope that helps.
Okay, this next one I think is for us. Are we allowed to add tapes of the same full collection to be digitized for the second round if tapes have been digitized at this point since the first round was due? Any materials that are nominated have to be, cannot have been previously digitized. So you cannot put any tapes in the collections in your application that you've since digitized. It should be the same collection, because then you'll be starting a whole new project. However, you can only add non-born digital and materials that have not been previously digitized. So you will have to amend your nominated materials.
I'm gonna start this next one, and then maybe CK, if you have any follow-up, because I don't really know a ton about this. We are exploring digital asset management systems. If there are costs with this system, such as Past Perfect Online, can these be included in the budget? And also, can we include web development costs for the digital portal and for a digital exhibition? So most of these are not disallowed costs. You would want to go to the guidelines to make sure, but there are certain specifics, like you can't have a software license you're paying for that goes beyond the term of the grant. There are certain disallowed costs. But generally, you are allowed to kind of build out some of the digital infrastructure to make these materials accessible. It's more a matter for us of the budgetary balance, because we are looking for at least half the budget to be going towards digitization. And I am not always the best at understanding how much these things cost. So that balance is important, but those are generally not disallowed costs.
Yeah, I'll follow up. It just depends on the data. Like Past Perfect, I don't know the subscription license right now, but it's not high. So I'd say definitely include that as a start. But you want to make sure you have funding to continue the subscription past the grant ending.
Thank you, CK. The next question, I'm going to start and then probably kick it to Ida or CK, either one of you. One reviewer questioned why this limited scope of digitization, 11 cubic feet out of nearly 200 feet. But in last year's application comments, a reviewer questioned a larger proposed number. We thought this would be more practical for 2 years of focusing on digitization, digitizing one sub-collection. What is the sweet spot in terms of how much is practical to digitize, and what is too much for you as reviewers, and what is too little? It's a great question. CK, did you? No, CK is cringing. No.
No,
Okay.
like it's it's hard for me. And I'll kick it maybe to Ida. I don't think in cubic feet. I think in tapes. So maybe Ida, if you want to answer the cubic feet portion, but in terms of like tapes in a 2-year grant, I mean, I would say if you're being like, we're going to digitize 10,000 tapes in 2 years, I'd say no, you're not going to do that. But at the same time, 500 tapes in 2 years seems too little. So, I mean, there is a sweet spot, but I think it also depends on the content too of the tapes and what you're trying to achieve and what story you're trying to tell. Um, but in terms of, yeah, if you're digitizing like papers or things like that, I'll kick that to Ida.
I love the giggles. I think that's really great because I do traffic. I don't even traffic in cubic feet. I've got to do better with this. I just know page boxes and document boxes. So I'm far more, crude. But I think depending upon the nature of the sub collection and what it means to either the larger collection and or the researcher or research being done. So it becomes the qualitative information. What's the quality of the information? What's the relevance to either an ongoing conversation or a new conversation? Because I have a foot in the history world as a historian, I have a foot in the archive. So this is what brought me here, so I can get ahead of everybody else to see what's available to write about. Of course, ethically, I'm sharing, so they think I'm sharing. But at any rate, so that would be my driving impetus. And then also human resources. Who is going to maintain these things? Because digitization requires a whole other level of stewardship and vigilance that things on the shelf require, but not as intensely. So if the institution, public, private, government, whatever they are, might not have the hands on deck to do it, this might be a beta test to see if we do kind of launch out into this digital space, can we sustain it as well as the analog thing? And I know that was my issue because I am a loner ranger over here. I had a technician who went to better pay. And so I was by myself and they're like, well, just write a grant. Well, writing a grant takes time and then you have to administer the grant through all the lovely bureaucracies. But I've been able to do that. Hallelujah. But for other institutions that might not have the kind of bandwidth, I can see why a small section of a larger collection would be the beta test. So I don't know the larger context around it, but that would be kind of my scratching the head, like that might be it, because I've been in that situation. But then as a researcher, I want to know what's in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, can I
yes, please, DeLisa.
I also wanted to add just that I think both of their points to I think in my experience when we had our first as a reviewer and as someone who's experiencing this, item level knowledge is so important because that will tell you everything you need to know. That'll inform your timeline, but then also the amount you can tackle within that timeline and with your staff and what you set up. So it really informs your entire plan. So I think while you're thinking cubic feet or maybe certain amount of feet, I think you might have to drill down a little bit more in the description of like item number, thinking like CK said, 10,000 tapes versus 5,000 tapes, 5,000 documents versus 10,000 documents or photographs or whatever. And those considerations for how you are scanning those as well. So
I want to piggyback on this really quickly, DeLisa, because you already started to answer it a bit. They had a follow-up question. Can you speak to the sweet spot for the amount of materials proposed to digitize materials that are not tapes and not documents, like art, posters, zines, t-shirts, and other odd ephemera?
yeah. So if you are a 1 year, I think 1 year, it's a selection, and maybe you're filling out a larger collection, like Ida talked about a sub collection. So enough that you can, one, if you already have people on board, great. So you don't have to worry about hiring. And again, it goes back to the timeline. This is all interconnected. So you know, how much time do you have in a year to do a sub collection of a larger collection maybe? But for 2 years or 3 years, the consideration is much larger because now you have the opportunity to take this further. And so what we thought about again was we did a publications our first go round in 2020. So we had to go down all the way to page number. Okay. So yearbooks, newspapers, programs, things like that. That gave us a sense of front and back. How many pages are we going to have to scan? And then how many files are we going to have to produce in our work plan and that gave us our timeline. That sort of pre-work matters for how you set up what you select to include. So lean heavy on if you already have inventories, if you already have this knowledge, expand it a little bit more, get as much as you can about how many items you have beyond a cubic or square feet or feet or whatever measurements inside of those boxes or anything. But you can, let's say, I think we completed maybe close to 11,000 items in 2 years with the publications. I mean, not items, I'm sorry, pages, excuse me. And so, those, just thinking about that. Also research, because people have done this work. So take the time to do a little, maybe dive online about some of this, where people have talked about how to select for these sort of projects. So I hope that helps.
Thanks a lot, DeLisa. Next question is for Sandra. Many reviewers commented on vulnerability concerns of the community we service. Would fleshing out more description of our 4-tier access policy, specifically restrictive access, make good use of time in discussing ethics of care of materials and sensitive content?
Yes, like without having like details of what those 4 tiers are, I think for me and for maybe a few other reviewers, having information that there are parts that are of concern and you note the concern, like I was saying earlier, that provided some points. Now, maybe there are other reasons why it wasn't ultimately accepted, but I think showing that you are cognizant of any particular concerns or issues and that you have a plan or strategy for providing access or not, to me is definitely a bonus area for in how I look at reviewing.
Program officer question, can we add the transcriptions, translations, for the tapes we're digitizing to our proposal? For example, the tapes are in Yugtun. I hope I said that right. Sorry. And we have the paper docs, Word docs for some. Not all the tapes are transcribed, translated. Can we pay for transcribers and translators to get the docs done and add this to the DAM system? Yes, those would be allowable metadata enhancement costs. Again, you want to look at the overall balance of your budget to make sure you kind of have the bulk of your costs going towards that core digitization, but it's really important within this program to provide appropriate access, and part of assisting with accessibility is getting these things translated, and I think the panel has a pretty good understanding of that.
Next one, Sandra. We are an Indigenous archives and have proposed to digitize materials that we possess, but do not technically own. Note that we also propose to digitize materials that we own in a Western legal sense. It is very common for Indigenous archives, at least in Canada, to possess copies of materials where the originals are held by other institutions. As the subject of these materials are specifically South End people, culture, language, etc., we are inclined to assert our right to digitize, describe, and make accessible these materials. Will CLIR see these materials as eligible to digitize under this grant?
So, on the like eligibility consideration, that might be one for.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. You do have to own and hold your collections. And we haven't changed that criteria,
Yeah,
unfortunately. So I would think for the IP reviewers going forward to only propose the ones that you have a clear ownership and hold for this particular go around.
I think and I can't speak to Indigenous law or Canadian law or Native law in the US, but I can speak to some ownership maybe consideration. So in the US specifically, a lot of archives are in the same position where they are not IP rights holders, but they are the physical holders of that content. And US law makes allowances for us to do a number of things to be able to preserve that content, to provide access to that content. So it may be something where you might want to consider looking at Canadian law and if there's anything that might be restricting how you might be able to interact with that content. But as far as physical ownership in the US context, and again, you might want to see how this applies to Canada. In the US context, having physical ownership does still provide you with rights to be able to do things around preservation in particular and access specifically as well.
I will take this next one. We got a note that our project doesn't seem to make it available beyond Hawaii, where we are located. It is part of our plan and focus to make the metadata accessible to all as part of our transfer into the state archive. But our programming of screenings and sharing footage is mostly focused on sharing with Native Hawaiian communities as these tapes are relevant, precious, and most valuable to them. Um, how can you suggest that can you suggest ways to share the metadata and footage beyond our state archives and the many communities here? And can I give that to Ida?
Yes, that is a very good question in regards to the metadata. I was fading in and out here. I apologize. I'm trying to read several screens. Trying to work. So I think it's very important that once again, we think about how not just the institution, but also the interest of the researcher applies to this. And I can't state it enough because now with the technology we have, we should all have some digital presence. And I think even if it's just a crumb, a hardy sized crumb of information, scholars, both graduate students, lay, professional scholars will find it and come back to you. So I think it's very important when we think of digitization, it's very important to build in the investment. It's like spending the money or spending the time to get the benefits on the back end. It's not immediate return on your investment, but over time it will do. I hope I answered that correctly. I see CK, so I think I'm doing that right.
Regarding making items available without cost, if we traditionally charge reproduction or use fees, would we not be able to for collections digitized? I'm assuming that you're speaking about the ones nominated for your application. Sandra, you want to answer that about fee schedules possibly?
Um, Charging fees in addition to what? I'm sorry.
It's whoever asked that question, could you be a little more clear? So are you saying that you charge for the items to be
I
submitted?
think I understand because um at our institution we charge reproduction fees for archives. And so the collections we have chosen to be a part of hidden collections are those that we know can meet the IP requirements, right? So, and Sandra can talk about that. So, for example, again, in our first grant, we did FISP publications because the university is the publisher of those and there's a certain level of ownership within those publications from the university, and we can provide the permission for them to be open access without fees, and release those from our typical standard archival fees that we charge. So
Okay,
I
so
can, oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry, Sandra, go ahead.
I was just going to speak to U.S. copyright law, and cost recovery is allowable. So if it, costs your institution to go, have somebody go pull something to make a copy and then make it available to someone else, that is not something that's disallowed. So it's allowable. I am not sure if there are any restrictions for the grant on charging fees, but under U.S. copyright law, that charging a cost to, even if you don't have IP rights, the cost that it costs you to make a copy for somebody is allowed.
So under the grant, we typically require that you make the metadata publicly accessible.
Yeah, you're not allowed to put restrictions that aren't already there, but we do have numerous funded projects. Um, Access is a component of competition, so there is a desire to see broad public access
Yeah.
frequently, but for things like high resolution copies, we have numerous grantees that are already charging for that as part of their general process, and they just provide a fee schedule, or for using like clips in a commercial documentary or the like. We do have historical precedent for sort of fee schedules for for things beyond just basic access.
Jane, are we at time?
I think we are here at time. Doo-doo-doo.
Jane, did you want to see if our reviewers had any last tips or anything they wanted to add?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, we can start with Sandra, and then we'll go around just some final words of wisdom as folks are preparing the applications, and then we'll have a reminder on your way out.
Like this has been my answer for all the things, but I mean, I've found it to be true in all the time that I've been reviewing is for me as an IP reviewer, I just want to see that you have a plan to address any ethical or privacy, cultural heritage, or intellectual property issues or concerns. So, I'm not saying that you would be restricted or not get points or not be able to move forward if you don't have um, that all resolved, because maybe there are other places where we can see the value and there's other considerations for that. But I like to see for myself that there's been a plan to address some of these particular issues and that you have a strategy for it, whether that is like getting something from the community or whether that is we got permission, all these years ago, or we're getting permission or we're working on this or we'll have it restricted. There are a number of different ways you can address it. But what's concerning for me is when I don't see anything about it, and it's a big red flag for me. So my advice is to find a way to talk about it and have a plan or a strategy to address it.
Great, thanks. We're going to move on to DeLisa.
Yeah, I would just echo everything I've said in terms of make sure you're following the guidelines and you're reading the details in CLIR's final application packet, and that you are specific and detailed in your budget narrative, specific details, and make sure that you triple check and have someone else check either in your grants office. If you don't have a grants office, someone that's good with numbers, just to verify everything is in order and in shape with your numbers. And then, yeah, just make sure you're reaching out to the people for letters of support and that you're being specific and detailed about capacity and thinking ahead for the future.
Thank you. Ida?
Yes, I just want to tell people to just stay encouraged and regardless of the outcome, to know that your project is valuable and that you just have to have the articulation as well as possible. Because when you're so close to the passion, you think everyone sees your passion, but it needs to be demonstrated by the language that you use in your application. So I think, like she said, Lisa had said, as well as Sandra, that the intentions are to make sure that it's clear that someone who does not know about it or have an understanding can really kind of sense the value, the humane value of it, or the numinous aspects of it, so that we all can be excited that this now adds to our human story. So that's what I found very interesting about the applications are the human interest. It's not just simply about an ethnic group or a region of the country or region of the world. It's really the human family. So if you can just take your time and really kind of communicate that in the words and even your letters of support, if you're an institution or like a community person, to really communicate that emotion in words and not be so verbose, but just rather, this matters and this is the why, and this is how we all are enriched by it. That'll be very helpful. And definitely the budget needs to be very clear because money is very important.
And then CK.
Yeah, I would recommend folks take a look at their digital sustainability. It was touched on a little bit, but how are you maintaining the long-term preservation of your files, and especially with moving image and recorded sound preservation files? That's a lot of data that you're going to end up with. And if you're part of a larger institution, what can you avail yourself that's already there? And if you're a smaller institution, think about what you might have to put in place to ensure that your digitized files, live on.
Great. Thank you all so much. A brief reminder of the remaining program timeline before we end. Final application stage will close on May 4th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And award notifications will go out to applicants in mid-August, and we anticipate public announcement of funded projects will take place in November 2026. So after which awardees can make their own public announcements and post any related job openings. Before you go, we'll ask that you please be sure to fill out a session survey. Your feedback has been really useful to us as we've developed this series, and this is one last chance for you to reflect on the series as a whole as we consider what we might improve if we do this again. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, and to our panelists for offering your wisdom and support to our applicants. Please don't hesitate to send questions our way to hiddencollections@clir.org as they come up between now and the application deadline. Have a great rest of your day and happy grant writing.